Good afternoon. This is Ned Oshiro. I'm an American English pronunciation coach. First of all, let me start with the updates on the statistics related to the coronavirus. As of today, in Okinawa, we have a total of 142 infections related to this coronavirus and 6 fatalities. By the way, these figures remain unchanged since the beginning of last month. I mean May 1st. So we have recorded 0 in terms of the infections related to this coronavirus, and that's really wonderful and superb and excellent, unbelievable, figures. I hope we can continue with this trend for the rest of my life. Okay, now, and I just want to have another announcement to make, is that as I said before, the city, there has been what they call the counter position, or the section in charge of this dealing with any inquiries from foreigners living in Okinawa, the Naha. I'm talking about referring to the Naha City office. Naha City office has started accepting any inquiries from foreigners who will be able to understand and speak English. So there will be, the one staff member has been assigned to this new counter called the window for dealing with any foreigner-related, questions and inquiries, and that they have started this service today. So if you have any questions and inquiries related to, say, handout money, which I mentioned before, that all the people living in Japan are entitled to receive 100,000 yen as handout cash. So please call them up. Even you can, visit the place. By the way, speaking of this handout money, I already have received this application form, and I fill out, and then I posted already. So I'm expecting to get the money, have the money deposited into my designated bank account, say probably 2 weeks or something like that. So if you are in dear need of this cash, please fill out the form. And if you haven't received this application form, please contact local, the government office. I'm referring to the Okinawa though. So if you're living outside in the prefecture, Okinawa, perhaps I'm sure that you can contact local, your city government, or the autonomous, government office in charge of this handout money. Okay. Now, today's topic is, I'm afraid in this lesson, if I say this might backfire on me later, but that is that if you really want to study English from scratch, you should learn from Japanese who have mastered English. The reason being that, first of all, if you're not good at English, you wouldn't be able to understand even if you had a tutor, American tutor, or native English speaking tutor who might be able to explain to you. But if you don't understand the word of English, it's useless, right? So if you're starting rechallenging from the beginning, saying, I'm sure that, that although it is a fact that most of the Japanese have already studied English, taken study, and spent about total of 6 years on English in throughout the junior and high school days. But I'm sure if you've grown up, if you have become adult and start working, and then you being away from this speaking or practicing or learning English, then it's not that easy for you to start everything from scratch. So you really want to start rechallenge this English learning. Perhaps I strongly suggest you learn this English from Japanese who have mastered the English, mainly because they know that these mastered, Japanese English teacher should know where the weaknesses for the Japanese when learning English, right? And also, when someone has to learn anything related to a grammar, the Japanese better to explain in detail, and then which no other, ordinary or English-speaking natives will be able to understand. Explain to them in terms of understanding words to this Japanese. That's why I'm saying that if you are beginner or in intermediate, I should say maybe beginning from beginner up to intermediate level in English learning, you should learn this from English from Japanese who have mastered English. And preferably, secondly, condition is that if he or she has stayed in native English-speaking, countries, that's more preferable. Reason being that English itself, you can learn, of course, language itself, but the culture and the cultural background are also very important when you're learning English. So those who have studied English in these native English-speaking countries, perhaps they may be able to tell you a little more details why this is the way it should be taught or learned or whatever. That's why I'm saying you should, if you are a beginner and intermediate, you should learn it from Japanese. And other thing is that once you learn this and improve yourself in English learning, say become the intermediate, then perhaps you can start taking lessons from native English speakers, especially when it comes to learning pronunciation and some other nuances which are not easy for Japanese to explain. For example, when I was studying English at Japanese schools in junior high and high school, we normally had learned the lesson, say, please sit down. That's the expression normally we were told to use that expression. But if you say it to a Native American or Native English-speaking people, please sit down, it sounds like, commanding. It's bossy, sound bossy. In telling someone to sit down, don't, walk around, but sit down, right? But it's proper way, appropriate expression, a way to say is that have a seat. But we never learned that way at the Japanese school. So that's the nuance difference between Japanese, even though those who have mastered English may not be able to explain that difference. And it's very natural for Native Americans or English-speaking people to be able to understand, recognize, and tell them, right? So that's the thing that once you reach the level, maybe intermediate level, perhaps you can start taking the pronunciation and other cultural explanation or cultural background explanation from the English-speaking people. That make a little round perfect. So what I'm saying is that when you start learning English from scratch, you should learn it from Japanese who have mastered English. But when you reach the level of the intermediate or maybe even advanced, then you should start taking English lesson from native speakers. So combination of this, both Japanese and native speakers, will be the best the teacher for you. That's it for today. Okay. Oh, that's right. The other things that maybe I should point it out is that the reason that not many native speakers won't be able to understand is that the Japanese has what we call shame culture, and Japanese culture is a shame culture. As the shame culture is concerned with reputation. So they don't want to make mistakes in front of other people. And neither they want to speak in front of, other Japanese. Speak English in front of other Japanese because they very fearful making mistakes, right? And as you know, that Western culture is the Sing culture, which has the ethical culture that has the standards inward. Yes, inward. Whereas the Japanese culture is shame culture that has the standards outward. That's the reason that perhaps that Native American English people wouldn't be able to understand the feelings of Japanese. It's very kind of difficult, and then what we call expression losing face is very important, especially when you live in Japan. You're not allowed to make mistakes, big mistakes, and what we call disgrace your reputation or name of your family. That's one of the factors that drive a lot of people to do things that are differently from the other Western culture. So without understanding these the characteristic or traits of Japanese people, I don't think it's easier for American or the English-speaking people to be able to teach English to a Japanese. That's another reason. Okay, thank you very much. Bye now.